The indigenous Australians have perfected the aerofoil with the boomerang. It's a flat lower surface with a curved upper surface. And it's that curved upper surface which controls the air, so it has to go faster. That's just Bernoulli's principle. Produces less pressure, so it creates a force perpendicular to it called lift. And that pulls the wing into the air. So you get those four forces. You got weight, lift, drag, and thrust. They're those four forces. And when you're in level flight, they're all in equilibrium. You can actually demonstrate yourself in your kitchen. If you look at a side profile of a spoon, just a regular dessert spoon, you've got that curved upper surface and flat there. Just go and dangle that underneath a stream of fast-flowing water in your tap, and it'll suck the spoon into the water. It won't push it away. It'll suck it in because it's producing lift.
Welcome to Overcoming Gravity, the podcast that uncovers how leaders and change makers attain liftoff, velocity and momentum in their career or business or their life. You'll hear how they navigated obstacles, the mindset shifts that fueled their rise, and key moments that turned things around. Get ready for a conversation where we uncover powerful insights to inspire your own breakthrough. Let's tune in.
Welcome to episode 1 of the Overcoming Gravity podcast, where guests describe how they attained liftoff or momentum or flow, either in their career, business, or their life, by overcoming what was holding them back. My guest this episode is Cran Middlecoat, who was licensed to fly before he was licensed to drive. And thousands of hours in the cockpit took him on mail runs and clinics for flying doctors in outback Australia, to flying jet airliners weighing hundreds of tons through some of the world's busiest airspace. This all changed when he woke up one day in an intensive care hospital unit. My guest is aviator, survivor and chief motivator, Cran Middlecoat, and we'll open the conversation with a question that intrigues me every time I fly. How do airplanes fly? Cran will tell us about the physics of gravity, lift, thrust and drag, and how that applies to business. Our conversation explores why we should redefine how we interpret failure, why the words practice and perfection should never be in the same sentence, and the huge benefit of feeling uncomfortable. Welcome, Cran Middlecoat.
Thank you for having me.
I've been intrigued by your story, but also with our new podcast, Overcoming Gravity, it's always intrigued me when I fly in a plane. I kind of know, well, the physics of why airplanes fly. I've never really understood, and I thought maybe we could launch this podcast with a little bit about the physics of airplanes and flying, and then talk a little bit about your story. How old were you when you started pilot school?
Well, I first had my hands on the controls of an aeroplane the day I turned 8 years old. A family friend took me flying and let me hold the controls, and I was hooked. Actually, before that, I was hooked because I come from a family of pilots. My father was a pilot. My grandfather was a pilot during the Second World War, and I just wanted to fly. I officially started learning to fly for afternoon school sport when I was 14 years old.
So you went to an aviation high school where you could do flying as a sport?
They didn't exist when I was at school. So no, I went to a school in the northern suburbs of Brisbane, and it was a very enthusiastic parent who was an aviation enthusiast who organised flying training as an introduction for some of the students. And I started when I was 14.
Weren't you lucky? Isn't that great?
Oh, it was so good.
That's great. Well, we'll talk a little bit about now how you go into schools and do motivation for students. But I'd like to launch the podcast with a little bit of a better than a layperson's understanding of why airplanes can lift off the ground and stay in the air. So how would you like to get started?
It's just air. It's physics. It's air. That's all it is.
It's air. It's
holds
physics.
Me up.
It's mathematics as well, isn't it?
Oh, well, absolutely. There's lots of mathematics in physics. We all know that. So it's just air. I mean, when I bring it with young people. When you're riding your bike, when in primary school I do flying STEM, I talk about contact forces. And when you're riding your bike, you can feel the air hitting your face.
Yes.
So the air is in contact with you. And so all an aeroplane does is have a specific shape of the wing which controls that air and produces a force called lift and takes the aeroplane into the sky.
The only thing I know is that when a plane reaches the speed of lift, it lifts off the ground. That's all I knew.
Well, I mean, you're halfway there, Nina. You're halfway there. So it comes down to the shape of the aeroplane and or the shape of the aerofoil or the wing. And so it was officially invented by an English baron by the name of George Cayley, who came up with the idea. However, unofficially, a bit of a plug here because I'm an Australian and well, we're both Australians, but the Indigenous Australians have perfected the aerofoil with the boomerang. It's a flat lower surface with a curved upper surface. And it's that curved upper surface which controls the air, so it has to go faster. That's just Bernoulli's principle. Produces less pressure, so creates a force perpendicular to it called lift. And that pulls the wing into the air.
And you're right. I decided to look at Khan Academy and why airplanes fly. And I learned a little about Bernoulli. I learned about lift. I also learned that it starts with gravity, which is the weight. And
Correct.
also there's thrust, which is propelled by the jet engines.
Yes, so you got those four forces. You got weight, lift, drag, and thrust. They're those four forces. And when you're in level flight, they're all in equilibrium.
So I believe there's a little bit of a debate amongst physicists around exactly the nature of the airflow. Like some people believe that the airflow across the top of the wing matches the airflow at the same rate as the bottom of the wing. They talk about lifties, little molecules that lift under the wing. I've heard that that's not true. They're at different rates. So have you heard anything about this debate about what actually causes lift?
I mean, I have heard the debate, and it works. It's all about just that air going over the wing of the aeroplane, and so you've got a higher force underneath the wing, which pushes, and you got the pressure on the top surface of the wing is lower, and that creates that lift force. You can actually demonstrate yourself in your kitchen. If you look at a side profile of a spoon, just a regular dessert spoon, you got that curved upper surface and it's flat there. Just go and dangle that underneath a stream of fast-flowing water in your tap, and it'll suck the spoon into the water. It won't push it away. It'll suck it in because it's producing lift.
That's a great experiment to do. So I urge people to do that and then put it in the comments how your experiment went. I love that. I'm going to give it a go straight after
Anyone can do it. Go to the kitchen, help yourself to a dessert spoon and hold it under a tap. Well, hold it so the stream of water is flowing over the curved part of the spoon, which is the bottom of the spoon, and it'll suck it into the water stream.
And I also saw a little bit about the principle of drag, the idea that if you put your hand outside the window of a car while it's moving and you keep it horizontal, there's very little drag. But the minute you put it vertical, your hand feels the pressure of the drag of the air.
That's right. And there's lots of different forms of drag. I mean, you've got form drag, you've got parasite drag, you've got induced drag. They're all different forms, types of drag, which contribute to slowing the aeroplane down. And you have to have more thrust than you do drag to get the aeroplane moving.
All right. So we're going to take this to the business setting. And we're going to see if we can apply the principle of drag, the principle of thrust, the principle of lift, and the principle of gravity, so we can overcome the gravity that if you're in a startup, you want to overcome the gravity of the fact that you're in startup and you haven't got flow or lift yet.
Yep.
Have you ever thought about, I mean, you're now self-employed. I mean, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your story, which you do share when you're doing talks with groups, where the reason you had to leave flying.
Well, I do share that, and it's part of my resilience. I mean, the reason I do what I do and my lane, I mean, I'll speak to anyone, but my real passion is empowering young people. My why, the reason I do what I do is to give these young people, I try to be that person I wish I had when I was their age. That's why I do it. And giving these young people these tools, which have gotten me through some really difficult times, which not everyone has, but I can deliver them in a exciting way. I have my, funny stories about like the times I used to fly dead bodies around in coffins and they start to burp and fart at you and all sorts of things, and bring in those funny stories like time I took birds down an engine of an Airbus and the whole aeroplane starts to smell like Red Rooster, and there's all these funny stories. So as we all know as public speakers, people resonate with stories.
Yes.
And so I bring that together with my story. So I absolutely loved my flying. And in 2016, I was getting horrid fatigue and took a few weeks off, told I got glandular fever. And anyway, 9 months later and multiple specialists, I was diagnosed with cystic brain disease. So a little lesion, it was about the size of an almond, right between the hemispheres of my brain. And ordinarily they don't grow. And the surgeon says, oh, it's nothing to worry about. We'll do another scan in 12 months and you'll be back flying. And after 12 months, it had actually changed. I said, give it another 12 months. And it had gotten bigger. And from the middle of 2019 until the end of 2019, it got really aggressive. It grew 11 millimeters. When you're talking about an object right between the hemispheres of your brain, 11 millimeters may as well be 11 kilometers.
Yes.
And so that's when I had to have surgery. And that, as a brain damage as a result of that surgery, resulted in a seizure. And I'm now not allowed to fly.
I see.
That was crushing. I absolutely crushed. I just love flying all my life. That's all I've wanted to do. So what I have to do now, what I see my reason now is to these tools which got me through my flight training. You got me through, flying heavy jets over a good part of the globe, how they can be related in the business world. And also, but like I said, my lane is inspiring young people and empowering them with the same tools, which they can use in high school and also in the real world after they graduate.
And so you're in Brisbane, Australia, but you go into schools and do assembly talks and evening talks in schools to motivate students to find their destiny, be the best version of themselves. I
call it my well-being toolbox.
Right.
I call it my well-being tool. And like we've heard that resilient, you've got to be resilient. It's such a buzzword at the moment, finding your resilience. But very few people I've found describe how to be resilient.
Yeah.
And this is where I have these tools of, right, when things don't work out, how do you actually be resilient? And that's what I talk about at schools.
Right.
And and the beauty of what I do is I speak to the students, but the staff members, the teachers can get exactly the same benefit from it.
Oh, yes.
So I talk about
teachers have to be resilient too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I was coming from a position where I lost my career that I absolutely loved, and I could have, crawled up in bed, woe is me, and blamed fate or whatever the case may be that I've lost my career. That didn't sit with me. I didn't like. I mean, there may be a possibility I get back for flying, which I certainly would love. However, in the meantime, these tools which got me through these tough times. So I talk about motivation, resilience, how to effectively study, and my aviation careers when I speak in high schools. What really frustrates me in the school setting and also in the corporate business settings of the world, we're still stigmatizing failure as bad, something to be avoided.
Right.
We're being told practice makes perfect. I despise that saying with every ounce of my being. I absolutely despise it because it's not true.
Mm.
I like a Stephen Hawking quote. Now, Stephen Hawking, arguably the most intelligent person who has ever lived, was known for saying that perfection simply does not exist. Without imperfection, neither you nor I would exist. That's right from Stephen Hawking. And that resonated with me. And so I thought about this saying I was always told as a young person, practice makes perfect. And I thought, well, that doesn't work. I mean, Stephen Hawking's obviously onto something. He's a very intelligent man. Or, rest his soul, he's passed on now. He was a very intelligent man. So I looked at that practice makes perfect. And I figured, well, practice still does something, but what does it do? And these are one of these tools I give young people on how to be resilient. Practice creates confidence.
Right.
Practice creates confidence.
Because you become more skilled, you become more certain that you're making progress, and progress gives you, there's an attribute called self-efficacy, which is that belief in yourself that you can succeed at a task or a skill, but then that adds to your whole toolkit of skills, and then it moves you forward in life.
Absolutely. That word you said called progress is another one I like.
Yes.
So I say aim for progress, not perfection.
Yes, absolutely.
Because
there's multiple intelligences, and it depends on the school and it depends on the curriculum and the country, but schools tend to be a little bit confined within their own realm, and there's not, with some schools, there's not a lot of opportunity to experiment or move outside that box. It's getting better. Maybe some people would argue it's getting worse, but still, there's an opportunity for students to realise that you don't have to be good necessarily at words and English and school curriculum to actually be successful in life and to find that destiny that you're destined to be.
I'm a straight C student in high school, Nina. I was a straight C student. But I worked really hard to get those Cs. I mean, I did the upper level maths,
Right.
and I worked really hard to get my Cs. You don't have to be a straight A student to be in aviation. This is what I tell, and from many, many, many careers. I tell these young people, if a C is your best effort, that is absolutely fine. If you're C, and that's why I was content with what I achieved when I went to school. I put a lot of work in, and I passed all my subjects. This is what I needed for my airline career. And I knew in my heart of hearts that was my best effort. And it's that best effort is that's what really counts.
So
that aiming for progress.
Absolutely. And because sometimes there's this fear of failure that can overcome people to the point where they don't actually try, because if they don't try, then they're forgiven if they fail. So they'd rather fail than try because of fear of failure.
Yeah, don't avoid failure.
Yeah.
Elon Musk, love him or hate him, you cannot deny, no one can deny that he has embraced failure.
Yes.
He's achieved more in that bit over a decade of his time with SpaceX developing rockets. We saw just last weekend that heavy booster landed on they call it the Mechazilla, with those big arms that come out and capture that. He's achieved more in 10 years than what NASA's achieved in the past 50.
Exactly.
Because he has embraced failure. He has embraced failure and done all up tests. One of my favourite quotes from Elon Musk was, after multiple failures, he was interviewed and he said, well, the pieces are bigger this time. So he saw it as a success.
Exactly. And I've read the Elon Musk book. There's a moment there where it was touch and go whether the whole business would go bankrupt. And
Yes.
Thank goodness for the world, it took off. So
Yes.
Here's the thing. I think the message there is never quit, because lift and takeoff can happen at any moment.
Yeah. I mean, you think back at the very first aeroplanes, like the Wright brothers, and drag was always there. Drag was always there slowing them down. They had to develop a means of propulsion. They had to get that engine going. And it came with persistence. And so in your business world or in life or as a school student, drag's always there pulling yourself down. You've got to build that propulsion. And only through persistence will you develop that means of propulsion to overcome the drag, which is slowing you down. I like that analogy. I'm going to remember that one.
Yes. Well, I'm a great believer in metaphors, and we're telling the story of, the story of how planes fly, but also, do you know any details of the Wright brothers? Did they actually understand physics, or were they just observing birds and they went, if birds can fly, why can't humans?
That is where the Wright brothers stood out. That's where they changed. Everyone was the whole flapping wings, they're trying to emulate birds.
Yes.
And that's where the Wright brothers stepped away from that and used a fixed wing design and getting that shape of the wing right, that flat lower surface, that curved upper surface, and embracing that design and then being able to control it. And they actually had wings that warped so they could control the amount of lift. If it was less on one side, the airplane would roll to the area where there was less lift.
Right.
And it would climb, the wing would rise in the area where there was more lift. And then they controlled that lift force by warping the wings. It's not a system you see very often in modern aircraft, but that was the basis for control-powered flight.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end of our conversation, Cran, and it's been an interesting exploration. What's coming up for you? What's over the horizon for you?
I love face-to-face speaking. I love being in front of an audience, presenting to schools, empowering young people so that they can do anything, and really telling them that the only person who's going to stop them from doing anything is them.
Well, you live and breathe flying. You were the right person to ask the question around why do airplanes fly. So thank you so much, Cran Middlecoat. And what's your website again? cranmiddlecoat.com.
Nice and easy. Or you can do a Google search, That Pilot Guy. So that's the one you bring, cranmiddlecoat.com, that pilot guy.
All right, and the links on LinkedIn and the website will be in the show notes. So thank you very much for your time today, Cran.
My pleasure, Nina. Thank you for having me.
We've been speaking with Cran Middlecoat on the Overcoming Gravity podcast for people that are aspiring to overcome their barriers, their constraints, and what's holding them back to achieve their destiny, a greater version of themselves. My name is Nina Sunday. See you next time, and bye for now.
Nina Sunday CSP is on a mission to help leaders transform culture. Nina Sunday travels from Brisbane, Australia to facilitate half-day and full-day workshops in your workplace Australia-wide. For a list of topics around leading people, productivity and communication, go to brainpowertraining.com.au signature programs. To book Nina Sunday CSP to speak at your conference in Australia, New Zealand, /Asia or globally, visit ninasunday.com to request a proposal.